This presentation is going to be all about how to respond to discussion board prompts. Sit back, listen, take some good notes. The first way to do this is to print the prompt or the discussion post out. Fully read the prompt, then read it again, more carefully this time. Once that assignment prompt is printed out in front of you, you want to scan the prompt for keywords and phrases to see what your professor is requesting. For instance, look for words like describe, explain, contest, use examples, identify, illustrate. After that, highlight all the keywords and underline all of the questions in the prompt. Oftentimes the prompt is asking for more than one thing. Make sure you're able to identify all of the specific questions in the prompt. The keywords and phrases above will help you identify exactly what it is the prompt is asking. Once you begin formulating a response, always look back at the prompt to ensure you are responding to all the questions it asks. It's often helpful if you jot down a quick outline. The first steps in any assignment are brainstorming and outlining. Jot down ideas that you may have and consider how you plan to organize your response in keywords and phrases. Free write and brainstorm the content for your response. Be sure your ideas are relevant and directly respond to the questions the prompt is asking. You don't want to address things that the prompt is not requiring from you. Stay on track. Once you begin formulating a response, frequently look back at the prompt to ensure you are responding to all the questions. There are some key tips, key strategies you can use to maximize your discussion board response. First, type your response in Microsoft Word or in some other Word program. Then paste your final response into discussion board. If you type in discussion board, you could lose your work. Once you're finished with your response, read it aloud to yourself or someone else. This will help you hear many grammar and sentence level mistakes. Carefully proofread the response before you submit it. Final step is to create a thread, paste it into Blackboard, hit submit, and you're done. Let's give it a try. After you log into Blackboard, if you look to the left, you're going to see discussion board. Go ahead and click on that. Once you get into your discussion board, you're going to see a series of questions from your professor. You might only see one, depending on how your professor uploads them. Let's do this question here, Enron documentary. First thing I want to do is copy this, and I'm going to paste this onto a Word document so I can print it out. Remember, your very first step is always print out your response. Have a physical paper copy of that response in front of you before you start generating an answer. So I'm going to print this out, and then we're going to take a look at this. Now that I have the response printed out, let's take a closer look. What do you think the director of the documentary, Enron, the smartest guys in the room, wants people to know? In other words, what is one of the main points of the movie that the director might want people to think about or share with other people in their life? Use a specific example from the movie to present your reasoning. Briefly describe the impact of the Enron Corporation on families using the micro level of analysis. Additionally, use one of the other 3 levels of analysis. Use examples for each of your points. What is your reaction to the movie? Choose one level of analysis and explain what needs to change on that level in order to avoid the same thing from happening in the future. I've gone ahead and read the prompt once. Now I'm going to read it carefully. Let's take a closer look at the prompt. First, let's go through and underline all the questions the prompt is actually asking. Let's take a look. What do you think the director of the documentary Enron, the smartest guys in the room, wants people to know? That's our very first question. What do we think that director wants people to know? In other words, now the prompt starts to break down that question so it's easily understood. What is one of the main points of the movie that the director might want people to think about or share with other people in their life? It's just simply restating what the first question's asking. Let's move on. Use a specific example from the movie to present your reasoning. There's that specific example. That's a key phrase that you want to highlight. Use a specific example from the movie to present your reasoning. Let's continue. Briefly describe the impact of the Enron Corporation on families using the micro level of analysis. Here again we have one of those key terms, one of those key phrases we talked about. Briefly describe the impact. Now this part is asking you to describe the impact of the Enron Corporation on families. But it's not only asking you that, it's asking you to pull in the micro level of analysis when you describe the impact. Let's continue. Additionally, use one of the other 3 levels of analysis. Use examples for each of your points. Once again, we have those key terms highlighted. The prompt's asking you to use not just the micro level of analysis, but another level of analysis too. It's asking you to provide examples for each of your points. Let's move on. What is your reaction to the movie? That's a really basic question. Let's continue. Choose one level of analysis and explain what needs to change on that level in order to avoid the same thing from happening in the future. This final statement is asking you to do 2 things. First, it's asking you to choose one level of analysis, and then it's asking you to explain what needs to change on that level in order to avoid the same thing from happening in the future. Always outline before you just jump in and start coming up with your response. When you go to respond to this particular prompt, you would want to do it in chronological order, meaning you would want to start from the first question and then work your way down. So your very first question that you want to respond to would be simply, what do you think the director of the documentary wants people to know? You would start there. When you outline, you don't have to write complete sentences, but it would sure be helpful if you would jot down ideas. That way, when you start to actually develop your response, you're prepared and you know how it's going to be organized. When we outline, we would want to come up with that one specific example from the movie. Jot down anything that comes to mind, any specific example that supports what the prompt is asking of you. From there, you would want to consider, okay, what are the levels of analysis that you're going to use? You know you have to use the micro level. What other level of analysis are you going to use? In that case, you might have to consult your notes or your textbook. But you want to have that already made up in your mind before you begin to write your response. To finish your outline, you might jot down in just a few words what was your reaction to the movie, and then you would do the final part, which is choose one level of analysis and explain what needs to change. Therefore, you would come up with a final level of analysis beforehand. Before we get into what a good post would look like, let's take a look at a bad post. This is what you don't want to do when you respond to a discussion board prompt. Let's go ahead and have a look. The prompt asks, what do you think the director of the documentary wants people to know? The bad post begins with, the movie said that Enron lied. Instead of focusing on the director, as the prompt asks, the student makes the movie itself the subject of the sentence. This sentence does not answer the question at all. The example given is vague and unclear too. They lied on all 4 levels. Who lied? The movie or Enron's executives? If the latter, there are no examples of what they lied about. Also, what are the 4 levels? What is the student referring to? This is extremely vague. Let's go on. The student then evaluates the film instead of continuing to answer the other questions asked by the prompt. It was pretty good. It might be okay for you to evaluate the film in a discussion post, but here it's off topic and irrelevant to the prompt. Make sure you respond to those questions that you underlined earlier. The student continues to discuss ideas that are not relevant to the prompt. I mean, everyone lie, though, so you know can't be helped on any level. First of all, that doesn't really make sense. We'll get into the grammar and the structure later. Also, the prompt specifically asks to discuss the micro level of analysis and one other level of analysis. Instead, this student just said they lied on all 4 levels. Also, it asks for examples for each point. Well, if the student doesn't have a clear level to discuss, of course it's not going to have examples. The student finishes with another evaluation, but they did a good job overall. Okay, the last question was not just what is your reaction to the movie, and doing a good job is not a reaction to the movie, it's simply a vague evaluation. This part asks choose one level of analysis and explain what needs to change on that level. The student doesn't select any level of analysis. This is a really poorly thought out discussion board post. Let's take a look at a good one. First of all, the question begins with, what do you think the director of the documentary wants people to know? The good post begins with, "I believe the director of the documentary wanted to expose the corruption within the Enron Corporation." The first sentence clearly answers the first question raised by the prompt, and it uses some of the same key words. The student continues this pattern of response. The prompt states, "What is one of the main points of the movie the director might want people to think about or share?" The student then gives an example followed by a brief description of the scene from the film to support the claim. The student finishes with, "I think the director wanted the audience to get mad at those types of things so that they wouldn't let them happen again." The second part of the prompt asks the student to describe the impact of the Enron Corporation on families using the micro level of analysis. Additionally, use one of the other 3 levels of analysis. The student states that the film provides enough evidence to do a multi-level analysis and states she will focus on the micro and macro levels. The rest of the paragraph are examples of those 2 levels using moments from the film, again following the prompt structure exactly. The end of the prompt allows the student to react to the film. What is your reaction to the movie? But it also asks for more critical thinking. Choose one level of analysis and explain what needs to change. The student responds that the movie made me mad. The student then points out that the macro level is what they think needs to change and gives examples of this. The good post is good because it responds directly to the prompt's questions, uses keywords from the prompt, has the same structure as the prompt, and uses specific examples from class materials. This is a well thought out, organized discussion board post. This is what you want to strive for whenever you create your discussion board posts. As with any writing assignment for any class, you're always welcome to drop by the English Writing Lab. Our website is palmbeachstate.edu/SLC. Then just click on English. You can schedule your appointment online. We have one-on-one tutoring. We also offer workshops. We have multiple resources here on campus. We hope to see you.